Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paxton Galvanek, and I am presenting to everyone today about how to brand yourself, how to navigate the video game development industry, possibly how to get a job in the video game development industry. My plan is to talk a little bit about myself, my history, just so you have a basis of comparison, and then talk about my company, FUNCOM. I'm currently with FUNCOM. I've been there for about 4 years, and then I'm going to talk about some tips, some tricks, some things that we see in the industry, so you can hopefully learn some things that will help you land a job in video game development. So let's get started. First off, a little bit about me, just so you know who's talking to you right now. I have about 16 years of business management and leadership experience. Built a lot of different teams at a lot of different companies. I've been with the video game development industry for about 10 years. I was a HR consultant and recruiter and kind of managed some companies. So here's a few of the studios that I've worked for over the years. I've worked with FUNCOM for 4 years. Prior to that, I worked with Activision. I helped build some of the teams for the Destiny 2 game, some the Call of Duty games. I worked with Raven Software, Vicarious Visions, a few of the other ones. Worked with Firaxis for a while, some Take-Two studios. I helped build the team for XCOM 2, if you know any of those games. So been doing it for a little while, managing teams. I have navigated the industry a little bit myself. I know how to hire for different companies, what different companies are looking for. So hopefully I can give you some of that knowledge during this presentation. So FUNCOM is a company I've been with for 4 years now. It is actually a 28-year-old video game development company, and we actually have a booth here at the Carolina Games Summit. But in the 90s, we were making games like Casper the Friendly Ghost and Speed Freaks and things for the PlayStation and the Super Nintendo and those type of things. And then we decided to kind of make our own, our own IP, which is called The Longest Journey. Some people may have heard of it, some haven't. After that, we decided to make MMO games. We made one of the first MMOs, which was Anarchy Online. Then we made Age of Conan, Secret World Legends, and now we make a whole bunch of games. So you may know Conan Exiles, Moons of Madness, Mutant Year Zero, Road to Eden. One of the most exciting things that we're doing right now is we've been teamed up with Legendary Pictures, and we are doing 3 Dune games over the next 5 years or so now. So we have to produce 3 of them. So we're currently making a persistent online survival game in the Dune universe. So we were on site with Legendary Pictures out in Europe. So we know what their models look like and what the sets look like. So we are in the same world as them. It's not an exact ripoff of what's happening with the Dune movies, but it's in the same universe that happens on Arrakis, the sand planet. So we're currently working on Dune, but right now we have about 250 people. We have 5 studio locations now. We have a studio right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have our headquarters is in Oslo, Norway, Lisbon, Portugal, Sweden, and Romania, which is our QA hub. So we always say that we make great games, but we have a damn good time doing it. So anyway, that's a little bit about FUNCOM, a little bit about me. At the end of this, if you want to ask me any questions, I will take questions from the audience or I'll take questions from anybody online. Whatever you want to do, I'm open, I'm flexible, I'm free. So, okay, first I'm going to talk about your brand. I actually have a background in marketing and advertising. I owned a marketing and advertising company up in the New York, New Jersey area for about 10, 11 years or so. So I knew a lot about branding and what that means. And that's important when you brand yourself to get into the game development industry, because people are looking for you and what you offer and what you're all about. So that's important. So I'm going to throw in some fun little memes and imagery. So some of you may know the Kazoo Boy. I think he's funny. So, okay. So your brand is you. It's who we are hiring when we look for somebody to join our team. It's you, what you know, what you bring to the table. You just need to realize that. So part of you is your resume and the experience that comes with that resume. It's important that we know what your resume looks like, that it's put together properly. I'm going to talk a little bit about resumes, and some people in this room may have a wonderful resume, others may have never made a resume. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on resume development. So a portfolio. If you are an artist or a game designer, how to put together a proper portfolio that a human resource person or a recruiter, what they want to see, what they're looking for out of a portfolio. This is important, and when I've built a lot of teams, I've done a lot of interviews. I've hired hundreds of people at different companies, and one thing that's really important is whenever you are talking about yourself, that you focus on what you do and what you bring to the table, and not using the words "my team did this" or "we did this," because when it comes down to the end of the day, we're hiring that one person, not the whole team. So that's one thing I always try to tell people: like, focus on you, who you are, your brand. Use words like, this is what I was responsible for. This is what I can do for you. So that's an important thing. So using your personality to sell yourself and stay positive all the time. It may be difficult when you're in an interview process. You may get discouraged. You may not have confidence. It's important to try to stay positive. We see that on the HR side. We see what happens to people when they don't feel comfortable answering a question, but just try to stay positive. Try to sell yourself properly. Your personality goes a long way. And I'll tell you, at every studio that I've worked with, there's a different culture. And finding out if you're a cultural fit is important for that studio. Some studios, may love to play Magic the Gathering. There may be this subculture of people that love that type of thing. That may be great for you and your personality type. Other studios may not do that. So finding the right studio that fits your personality is important, and being yourself is really important when it comes to like your brand. One thing I will say is people hire over personality sometimes rather than skill set. There's been many times when I've hired somebody that may not have been the perfect fit on a piece of paper, but they were amazing in an interview. I'd want to sit next to this person and have them build a game with my team because they just fit so well. And you can teach people certain skills. You could teach people C++ or the Unreal Engine or C# and the Unity engine. You could teach these type of things to people. But a personality goes a long way. Having a bad personality on your team can destroy a team in game development. You'll see this in the news with bad personality types that do really harmful things to game development teams. So it's really important finding the right people and hiring the right people to make a game. So just realize that your personality does go a long way in your brand and what you bring to the table. I'm not saying that your skill set isn't important. I'm not saying you can just go in and not have any type of knowledge of art or the languages that we use when we program or what we use in our studio. That stuff is needed, but your personality does go a long way. This is one thing we've always said in our office is desperation is a stinky cologne. There's people that may have been out of a job for a long time that they get desperate. They're like, I need a job. They'll follow up 1,000 times. It's a turnoff when that kind of stuff happens. When somebody is super aggressive and in your face, it's a turnoff. So just realize that you may be hunting and being proactive is one thing, but then desperation is a completely separate thing. So just realize that we can read when there's desperation and it's a stinky cologne. So I'm going to talk about your resume and show you some pointers. There's a funny thing. I like to F up your resume. And I say that because if you look at the image right here, it's an F shape. And this is what somebody's eye pattern goes to when they're looking over a resume. It shows up in the pattern of an F. So any HR person, any recruiter will look over a resume, and where the red is on this image is where their eye goes to the most. So you need to make sure that when you're making your resume, the most important information is in that red area. So this is done with the retinal scan when people viewed over documents. So focus on putting the most pertinent information, your skill set in these areas. So I like to tell people, think about your resume and F it up as a joke. So your objective. There's been a lot of times when people have written very generic objectives, or I've gotten so many objectives that have been written to the wrong company. Like if you're applying to Epic Games, you're like, I'd love to be an artist at Epic Games, and it gets sent to me at FUNCOM. I'm like, come on, you couldn't have just fixed your resume and just changed it a little bit for me. I appreciate it when somebody can customize an objective a little bit. You don't need to write something, you don't need to write me a book. You just give me 2 or 3 sentences that tell me what you're about and what you're looking to do. So I would say a generic objective equals death. I want to be an artist in game development. Tell me a little bit more. Like I need to know a little bit more. Using keywords or bullet points is super important. That's one of the first things I look at when I look at a resume. I see contact information. I see the objective. I want to see bullet points. I want to see your experience, what you've done, bullet point things, have things laid out in a professional manner. Listing your skills and software is really important. Sometimes when, let's say I'm looking for a programmer, I want to make sure that programming that applies to my company may know C++ or may know the Unreal Engine. That's what we use at FUNCOM. We use Unreal, so I want my programmers all have a little bit of knowledge in the Unreal Engine. If you're applying to some other studios, like let's say you're applying to, I was working with Gameloft for a while, or some of the other ones, they use the Unity engine, or they know C#. Those are the type of programming languages or engines that you'd want to list on your resume. Make it right there in the forefront, because I want to see that when I'm hiring somebody. Your work experience, always start from the most recent to the oldest, and you could always put game testing things that you've done. Like I know Red Storm right down the street here in Raleigh, they do a lot of game testing opportunities for people. If you listed that on your resume, I could see that you've been proactive and you've been part of, you haven't necessarily been hired by a studio, but you've went on the studio campus, you've taken the time to test a game for them. That's important to me. If I was hiring somebody in QA or a customer service person, I might take that into consideration, that this person went out of their way to do some game testing. Internships are really important, and I'll talk about internships later and on how to possibly land an internship. And then listing your project work, like if you were in school and you shipped a project on Steam, let's say you got something up on Steam, listing that on your resume is also important. After that, putting your education, putting the institute, the year that you graduated, and the major is pretty much mandatory. I don't necessarily need to know the GPA and all that kind of stuff. This is important. So a recent study says that recruiters spend an average of 6 seconds reviewing an individual resume. That means you have 6 seconds to wow somebody. That's it. And I'll be honest, I have recruiters that work for me, and I've ran a recruitment team for a while. They get thousands of resumes, and that sounds horrible, but they have to sift through thousands of things every week, I'd say, and they have to find the best of the best and find out what people fit for certain roles. So you have 6 seconds to do this the right way. So hopefully you could take some of these points that I'm about to give you into consideration when drafting up your resume and making sure that it hits the hardest when you deliver it to somebody. So let's talk about do's and don'ts on a resume. Your experience, list specific experience, your skills, accomplishments. If they are relative to the job that you're applying for, that is amazing. So put that in the forefront. I'll tell you what, people have customized resumes for every job that they've applied for. I've known a lot of people that have 6 or 7 different types of resumes, and they are customized for wherever they're applying for. Don't think that you have to have just one resume that just shows like basic experience. Customize those things, kind of highlight certain points that fit with the company that you're applying for. So don't mention experience that's not relevant to the position that you're applying for. I can't tell you how many times I've seen resumes that have had experience, somebody on a wait staff or somebody, working at Walmart. I mean, it's not necessarily relevant to game development. If you don't have anything, then maybe that's fine. But for the most part, you can just exclude that. And I'd rather see that you were testing something, or that you were part of a modding group or something. I'd rather see that kind of stuff than see that you were on the wait staff at Applebee's for 2 years. I mean, that doesn't really do much for me. So you could exclude that from a resume. Your education, like I said, you don't need to include the GPA, but make sure that you have your degree, your certifications, anything that you've gotten for your education. Personal information. There's been so many times when I've gotten a resume that does not have a phone number or an email address, and I'm like, how am I supposed to contact this person? So right up at the top, please put your name, a phone number, an email address, just ways that I can contact you. You don't necessarily need to put a full address on a resume. I would say that putting a city and state would be important. A lot of times I need to know where the person is, what time zone they're in. I've hired people. Right now I hire globally. So I hire people to go to Norway and Portugal and Romania and the US, and I need to know what time zone they're in. So if they're applying from California, I want to know that they're Pacific Standard Time and that there's going to be a 9-hour time zone difference between the team, if they stay in California, to the team in Norway. So I need to take those things into consideration. And we have relocated people, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But put down just a city and state. You don't need to put your marital status or your religion. I don't want to see any of that. A lot of time that's popular in what they call a CV. In Europe, they'll put their marital status or religion. Here in the US, it's not as popular, but I like to reiterate, please don't put that on a resume. I don't need to see that. Other do's and don'ts. Vocabulary. Using simple, direct statements. Like I said, you have 6 seconds to wow somebody. Don't use cliches or idioms like I'm a team player and I'm great at communication. Like most people are good communicators. And most people are team players. When you do game development, you have to be a team player. So you can avoid that. Just give me things straight and to the point. Applicant tracking systems. Applicant tracking systems is the software that you apply, that you put your resume into at different studios. At FUNCOM, we use something called Team Taylor. There's other ones called like Greenhouse and Bullhorn. There's so many different applicant tracking systems. You want to make sure that you optimize your resume and whatever you're submitting to any company for that applicant tracking system. That means do not flatten an image. Like if you have your resume in Word and you're like, I'm going to print this as a PDF, and it flattens the whole thing and you can't see any of the text, our applicant tracking systems can't pick up that text. So you need to realize that that document that you're submitting, there's things happening in the background that's picking up keywords, picking up your name, your address, and it's plugging it into our system. So don't flatten things. Don't leave out keywords. Make sure that it's either a Word document or something that the applicant tracking system could pick up. Your length, be concise. 2 pages is pretty much the max that I would say. Try to be concise with the things that you put on your resume. Try not to go over 2 pages. There's been times when I've received, 7 or 8 page resumes, and I'm like, I honestly, my team and I cannot physically go through these 8 pages. Like, we want to know top level, who are you? What do you bring to the table? Are you right for this role? That's it. So we're not going to go through 8 pages of a resume. So stick to 2 pages. One does not simply hire based on resume alone. This is very true. Like I said early on, it's about personality. It's about a lot of other things. So your portfolio is a big part of that. So your portfolio could be on a clean website. It needs to be up to date. So let's say you're an artist. Having a portfolio on, let's say, I think I had an ArtStation, Polycount, Carbon Made, one of these type of industry pages. I mean, you don't have to pay anything to have an ArtStation page up. You could throw up a WordPress site if you wanted to. Just have something that's modern, up to date, shows your work in an organized fashion. I will tell you that when my team and I look over portfolios, we would rather see 1 or 2 really amazing pieces of work as opposed to 20 half-done pieces of work. So keep that in mind. A lot of artists and a lot of people are like, I'm just going to show them everything to show that I'm a well-versed artist. Like, I don't want to see that. If you show me something that has an amazing poly count that you've spent a lot of time in, that's what I want to see. Like 1 or 2, maybe 3 things is going to be great. But don't give me 20 different items. So I threw up Brian Wells. He's my senior concept artist. He's currently working on the Dune project, but he has an ArtStation page that had a nice background, and he was over at High Res for a while, so he's got some cool stuff on his. But just having a nice, organized, industry-specific portfolio is important. If you have social media, make sure that that's branded with your examples and who you are. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at somebody's Facebook page or their Twitter page if I'm interested in them, or your LinkedIn. Make sure that you have at least a Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter page. I mean, we look at all that kind of stuff if we're interested in a candidate. Having your resume on the website is important if you can do that. That's nice for me to be able to download a resume. And then always making sure that your contact information is on the page is super important. Like I said, there's been times I've gotten resumes that don't have it, just like there's been times where there's been ArtStation pages that don't have a contact me link. I want to know, if you're applying, how I can get a hold of you. If you can use videos, that's great. There's plenty of YouTube videos that you can post online. Let's say you're an animator and you want to show me how to do rigging or some kind of technical animation. If you could put together a video, I will absolutely take that, and just send me a link to those. I've looked over plenty of videos. Your personality and being a culture fit in a company. So again, this goes along with the branding, like defining yourself. Who are you? Standing out amongst the hundreds of people that apply for these jobs. When I post a job on our job board through Team Taylor, there's been jobs that we've gotten 300 candidates for. Like for our junior and our intermediate positions, we'll get 300-400 candidates that we'll have to sift through, and you need to find a way to stand out. How are you going to define yourself? How are you going to stand out amongst the rest? Again, that's through a professional resume or well put together resume. And then when you are interviewing, having your personality stand out is super important. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. Avoid the term we. Focus on you and what you bring to the table in any conversation. You're going to read the room and see if you're a culture fit with any company that you're applying for. I know this sounds horrible, but a lot of times in an interview, I'll do something called the shit test. I will say to somebody in an interview, like, you'll say the word shit, and you'll see how they react to it, because in game development, we make M-rated games, and there's times where that stuff happens, and you need to see how somebody may react when you swear in front of them, because the real world is people swear in the office, and if you're interviewing and somebody is very timid around other people swearing, you may not want to have somebody like that on your team, and that may be more of a liability. So you have to figure out what studio fits you and your culture, and understand who you're applying to. Like if you're applying to FUNCOM, whoever knows us knows that we've made Conan Exiles. We've been known to have a dong slider in our Conan Exiles game where you could enhance that kind of stuff. So like, just realize that we have that kind of stuff, and there's other studios that don't. That may be a better cultural fit for you. Just understand that when you're applying to jobs. So I'm going to show you some real world examples, and I'm going to tell you a little story right now. So I was working with Take-Two Interactive, and I was building the team for Firaxis in Maryland for XCOM 2. This is about, I don't know, 7 years ago, six or 7 years ago. So I was looking for level designers to work on XCOM 2. We needed to find people that had the Unreal Engine experience. They use Unreal at Firaxis. I had a candidate that came from a AA studio down in Florida. They were working with the Unreal Engine, but this guy didn't have the experience that Firaxis was looking for. So I knew that this candidate was an amazing fit. I talked to the HR team. I talked to the lead designer, and I said, this candidate has this passion that you're not going to find in any other candidates. And he's like, well, he doesn't have the right background. He's been with this AA studio making a dungeon game where there's defenders, something like that. So it wasn't the right fit for what they were looking for. So this candidate took it upon themselves to completely block out some levels that they would possibly use in the XCOM game. And we then submitted those levels to the lead designer and said, listen, we know you said this candidate wasn't a good fit, but he has the personality and he has the skill set, and here's proof. He took it upon himself to block out these levels. And wouldn't you know, this candidate ended up getting the job, because honestly, he went above and beyond. So that leads me to this, like, don't just meet expectations, exceed them. Always try to go above and beyond whenever you possibly can. This candidate got that job because they did more than somebody else, because they went above and they proved that they can do what they were looking for. Even though on paper it wasn't a perfect fit, he got the job. So I'm going to talk about the typical hiring process. This isn't across every single studio. Like I said, I've hired people with Activision and Take-Two and Gameloft and Firaxis, and now with FUNCOM. So every hiring process is a little bit different, but this is a typical hiring process, let's say. So step one is to get that information, your information, in front of any hiring authority, and being proactive. Like I said, don't be desperate, but be proactive. You can follow up. You can submit when you submit your resume. Following up with an HR person or the internal recruiter is always a good thing. Be like, hey, did you get my resume? Or even connecting with somebody on LinkedIn. Like if you search LinkedIn and you're like, oh, I see that the recruiter, at FUNCOM is Charisse. I'd love to connect with Charisse on LinkedIn. Most of us will connect with you. Like most recruiters and HR people will connect with almost everybody on LinkedIn. So feel free to do that kind of stuff. But again, be proactive. Next is a resume and portfolio review. This comes from recruiters, websites, referrals, but this is when your stuff gets in the system. We look it over. We say, are they a good fit for the job? Yes, no. And then we will either decline them or move them through in process. After that, you'll typically do about a 30-minute phone screen with an HR professional. This phone screen is trying to figure out if you're who you say you are, and if you have what we're looking for. And plus, we like to talk to you about our company and what we're doing and make sure that there's a good cultural fit. So that's about a 30-minute call. And we try to answer as many questions as we can that you have. But again, we'll go through your resume a little bit, but it's not going to be a very technical call. It's not going to be, we're not going to ask you any like behavioral based questions or anything. It's just going to be very top level. You said you did this. Tell me a little bit about that. It's kind of just a nice conversation. After that, we have done art programming and design tests. Some studios do them, some don't. It depends on the seniority of the position. I will say at times director level people may not get a test. At FUNCOM, we do a Boyd's test for all of our programmers. A Boyd's test is it's a flocking simulation where we ask somebody to optimize a bit of code. So we give that to everybody, from our interns to our senior level people, and we see how well they optimize that bit of code. I know a lot of other studios do that. They'll give art tests, design tests. Be wary of the studios that are telling you to do an art test that are aligned with the games that they're producing out there. That's one thing that you don't want to be giving anybody free work. Your time is valuable when you're applying. You don't want to be doing any of that kind of stuff. We typically do very general things where we're just trying to match apples to apples, making sure all of our candidates are doing the same type of thing. It's not aligned with any of our games, and we just want to see how people present things like, oh, make a weapon that may be sci-fi based and let us know with this criteria. So that is optional at some studios. We do it at FUNCOM. A lot of studios will do that. After that, it's going to be a phone, Zoom, or MS Teams interview. Things have changed recently with COVID. We've been doing a lot, mostly video interviews for everything now. We use MS Teams at FUNCOM, but one thing I will tell people about doing video calls is make sure that you present yourself properly and that you have a nice background, and there's not a pile of clothing sitting in the background, and a cat's not burrowing their way out of the clothes. Like all these things were like, oh, that's a red flag that they're not necessarily maybe an organized person. So keep in mind that that's all like your brand is how you portray yourself to somebody. It's your background. It's the way that you're dressed. It's how you talk to people. So I will tell you, if you're going on a video call with any type of industry professional, just make sure that you clean up the room a little bit and that you leave the cats in the other room and you at least present yourself nicely. After that initial interview, which it's typically about an hour or so, you'll meet with probably the lead of the team, maybe somebody from the production team, like an associate producer or producer, like at least at FUNCOM, they like to be on those type of calls. After that, we have done face-to-face. Lately, it's been online group interviews. That's when you're going to meet more people. If you pass that first one, you'll go on to the second. That happens maybe a couple days later. Historically, we have done the face-to-face where we like to fly people out, but lately, again, online. And if anybody has any questions about our new hybrid work from home plan, and we're allowing for remote workers at FUNCOM, and I'll talk all about that later if you'd like. But it's a new world with COVID, and a lot of studios are kind of following with that. So FUNCOM's in the same boat. And I know studios like High Res down in Atlanta, they're doing the same thing where they're allowing, remote workers or a very hybrid work from home plan. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. After that is you getting an offer and hopefully accepting an offer. And then after that, you start your new job. That's the typical process. Step 6, you may get additional interviews. Sometimes studios will be like, oh, I want you to talk to our executive producer if it's a high level position, or I'd want you to talk to some of the other team members. That may get strewn out to maybe another group interview. But that's the typical process right there that most studios do. Changes in HR interviewing. Like I said, video interviewing is a thing of the present. This is what we're doing for almost everything. Online testing. We don't necessarily do this, but I know there's definitely a lot of studios that will bring up a Google Doc and ask you to reword something. I know our QA, a lot of times they'll ask you to kind of put down the process of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like that. Like they'll ask you to do some interesting things. Or programming tests. A lot of studios will ask you to tweak some code through a Google Docs. Behavioral-based questions. If you've never heard of a behavioral-based question, most HR professionals will ask you some kind of a behavioral-based question that starts with tell me a time when you did this. And what we do with a behavioral-based question is we're trying to figure out what you've done in the past, which will indicate how you will do things in the future. So before you go into an interview, you should try to think about the things that somebody may ask you. Tell me a time when you got through a very difficult adversity with your project and how you overcame that, or tell me a time when you dealt with a team member that wasn't really working well with you. We're going to ask those type of questions. So in your mind, you should think to yourself, okay, I've got these pool of questions that I think they're probably going to ask me. Try to come up with those answers. In your head, just kind of map things out. If they ask me a question about, why am I leaving? Or why did this team member not work out on my team? Or try to have those things mapped out in your brain before you get into the interview. A cultural fit. There's tests out there, the Myers-Briggs test, which is a personality test. I'm sure a lot of people here have taken those type of things. Some studios will ask you to take a personality test to see if you have the right personality to fit with the team or the culture. There's also something called the Wonderlic test, which is just a general knowledge test. It asks you questions like, what is the circumference of the Earth? And you'd have to be like, well, no, I was never taught that. But if I know that it's, 3,000 miles from New York to California, and I do that, like you have to do, it's just a general knowledge test. And we don't do it at FUNCOM, but I know some studios have done the Wonderlic test before for people. So, okay, getting your foot in the door at a studio. So let's talk about this. I mentioned it before, but connecting with people, HR managers, recruiters, hiring authorities, we will all connect with you. If you went online and you said, you typed in Paxton Galvanek into LinkedIn and you said connect, I will 100% connect with you, because I like to have a network of people, because the more people I know, the more people will see that when I have job openings, they may share that with a friend of theirs. So most HR professionals, recruiters, hiring authorities will connect with you. And it's really good to get on LinkedIn, have a nice professional profile that has a good picture, that has who you are, and then try to connect with people. Like I said, if you want to connect with me, go ahead, connect with me. I'll be there for you. Internships. This has been something really difficult with COVID. I'll totally admit this. We had internships at FUNCOM. We had to shut down our internships because it's really hard to give an internship to somebody when you don't have a senior or a mentor on site to kind of help guide them. It's been a difficult thing for us. Most of our interns have gotten full-time positions at FUNCOM. I know a lot of studios are doing internships now. Applying for those is wonderful. If you do well in an internship, again, it typically means that you could probably get a job at that studio if you do well. There are internships listed on most studio websites. So if you go there and you'll see, like, I know a lot of the Activision studios will say, all right, this is our season for internships. It's the springtime, or I think they do spring and fall. But anyway, there's websites out there that have pretty cool things on them that map out where studios are, gives you information about them, how many employees they have, who's hiring. So if you go to like gamedevmap.com or devmap.gamesmith.com, you could actually like hone in on an area that you're interested in living in. So let's say you want to live in Raleigh. If you're not from here, you can click on Raleigh and be like, oh, I see Red Storm and Insomniac and Epic and FUNCOM and Amanji, and you're like, wow, there's 5 or 6 game studios in this area. So I might want to live in that area, because we all know the game development industry can be volatile at times. When people staff up for certain games, if the game doesn't do necessarily well, there have been layoffs. That's a typical thing with game development. So being in an area that has a hub of game development studios will help you so that you don't necessarily have to relocate. That's been a really tough thing with game development. That's been a struggle for most studios, is, keeping the staff and then having people move around a lot. Like, I have a family. I've got 4 kids. Like, I don't want to move anywhere. I want to be in a hub where there's other video game development studios. So keep an eye on that when you're applying to jobs. Like, what else is there? What other companies are there? There's a lot of different hubs out there. I mean, California has a ton of studios all across from San Francisco to LA, but the Seattle area, and even places like Madison, Wisconsin. For a while I worked with Raven Software, and I mean, there's like Human Head, and there's a whole bunch of other studios in the Madison area. So you just find out where those hubs of video game development studios are, and you can apply to those jobs, or at least do some research into those studios. Going to gaming conventions like this. You're here listening to me talk. I'm the HR director of FUNCOM. You can meet me. You could talk to me. You can give me your card. I will remember you. I typically love doing these type of things. We have a booth. Come talk to us. This happens a lot with, the PAX conventions, or even here in the Raleigh, there's the East Coast Gaming Conference. I typically have a booth there as well, and my team's there. So going to conventions like this will introduce you to people. They'll remember you. We'll exchange cards. You can connect with people. It's important. I hired my junior programmer from, I guess it was 2.5 years ago, from ECGC, and she is outstanding. She does a lot of AI programming for us now, but she's working on a new Dune project, and she's one of our best programmers now. And I found her at a convention 2.5 years ago. So like, you never know who you're going to meet at these type of things. Go to these type of conventions whenever they pop up. and try to meet people. Be a little bit outgoing. I know it's hard for people. I know sometimes if you're an introvert, it's hard to talk to people. It's hard to go up and be like, "Hi, my name's Tom, and I want to meet you." It's important to get your name out there and just make the connections. Connecting with external recruiters. These are recruiters that may not be part of a studio, but they recruit for studios. There's a few of them. Like I work with like Digital Art Management, DAM, and I work with Game On recruiters, and they're all contracted by my company to find people for our roles. So the more that you can connect to these external recruiters and be in their pool of candidates, the more that you're going to get sent out to all these different studios as jobs pop up. So if you get your resume in front of 4 or 5 different external recruitment companies, if they have a job pop up that's for a junior gameplay programmer, they'll submit you to those studios if you give them the approval. So it's always great to connect with external recruiters. And most of those external recruiters come from the video game development industry. I know most of the people at DAM and Game On and all these other ones, they worked at Epic for years, or they worked at Ubisoft. So, I mean, they have industry experience. They know what they're looking for. Having your background and experience with them, in their database, super important. Connect with them. Big open room, no enemies. This is a boss room. This is just showing you that this is the obvious stuff I'm about to go through. But I would like to talk about some harsh realities of game development. So it is extremely rare for any studio to relocate an entry-level candidate. I'll talk a little bit about our work from home policy right now. I guess is a good part for it. But so at FUNCOM, we are now allowing people to work 100% remote if they want to. If they want to come and work in Raleigh, we will relocate people. We do have a hybrid work from home policy where people can come into the office 2-3 days a week if they want to, but they could work from home 2-3 days a week. So we're being really, really flexible with people due to COVID because we'd like to retain the best talent. And we realize that people have options now. If you want to, you can, work for, Riot or whatever, and they'll hire you and you can live in North Carolina and get a West Coast salary. That's the reality of it right now. So we're being just as flexible here in North Carolina where we are, we're offering these type of incentives to candidates and our employees. At FUNCOM, we're all about a great work-life balance, and we're a Norwegian company. We're based in Norway, but a Scandinavian company at heart. Great work-life balance. We don't have a crunch culture. We honestly work 40 hours a week, and we've realized that a crunch culture will kill productivity and people will quit on us. And we've realized that we don't want that. So there's been a lot of negative press out there with studios that have done that. So with a company like ours, when you do your research on companies and who you're applying for, just realize that there's some studios that may have live games that may do a little bit of crunching, and that's part of the culture. You have other studios that don't do that. So it all depends on what you want. Like if you want to be part of those studios, that's great. They may offer you 25% more in your salary than a studio that doesn't. It's a give and take. You have to find out what works for you. But anyway, back to this point is that it's rare for us to relocate an entry-level candidate because we typically could find an entry-level candidate in the area that we're based out of. So we have 5 locations. We're in, like I said, Norway, Portugal, Romania, Sweden. Even we're starting a little hub in the UK right now and in Raleigh. So there's a huge pool of candidates here in Raleigh for us. I mean, with all the other studios and all the other things happening, I mean, with Epic Games here, I mean, we use the Unreal Engine. They made the Unreal Engine. They have a ton of QA people that have tested the games and that know the engine, that are looking for extra work. We could find people here locally to do what we need done. So that's the reality of it. So if you're somewhere in Alabama and you're like, oh, I want to work at FUNCOM in Raleigh, North Carolina, it's going to be really hard for us to relocate you here. If you're an amazing candidate, it may be something where a remote position may work, but just realize that. So this is one point that I've battled with a few people on, is that your school or project work doesn't necessarily count as real world experience. It is important experience, and I'm not downplaying that it's not important experience, but it's not necessarily industry experience. It's not like you've worked in a studio, you've been in a production environment, you've done sprint planning, and it's not like that. You were with a team of people working on a school project. It is what it is. It's great. You may have chipped that game on Steam and it's doing well. It is just something you worked on at school. It is a school project. Don't try to play it off like it was not a school project, because all of us in the HR world, we know when it's a school project and when it's a professional project. So I just don't like it when people try to pull the wool over our eyes and say, oh, I shipped this game, and we look into it. We're like, oh, that was your project team. And you're trying to play it off like you didn't do this while you were in school. So I think it's great that people work on projects when they're at school. I take part in a lot of the senior reviews at a lot of the local colleges, and I look over all those games, and I think it's amazing, but I just don't like being lied to. So harsh reality is that a mediocre designer, artist, programmer will never get a job in the industry. There are so many people that want to work in video game development that if you're just an okay artist, you're never going to get a job. You have to do the best that you can. I mean, sure, you could work at an indie studio and try to get better and better, but we try to hire the best of the best at our company. So push yourself. I tell everybody whenever I talk to them, find out what you're passionate about. If you're like, I'm a game designer, but I also love technical animation, and I'm like, you need to focus on what you're super passionate about, and then be the best at that. Don't be this generalist that's like, I could do everything. I could do audio. I could do game design. I can do level design, but I also can do some 3D modeling. I'm like, no, I don't want somebody that's this generalist. I want somebody, at least at our studio, I want somebody that's super focused and super knowledgeable at a specific area, because we have hard surface artists at our studio that focus solely on making weapons all day long. That's what they do. We have systems designers, we have game designers, we have level designers, people that are very, very specialized. So if you're a generalist, you may not fit in well, because it's like, well, I'm okay at that stuff, but I'm also okay at this. So I tell everybody, find out what you're passionate about, focus on that, do the best you can at that one thing, and then try to land a job there. Again, I said this earlier, but no one's going to fight for you. You always need to fight for yourself. Don't sit back in your chair and be like, okay, I'm going to wait for them. Follow up with people, or at least try to apply to other jobs. There's times when it takes us a week or so to get through all the resumes that apply to us for that week. If there's 200 or 300, like, it takes time. So just realize, okay, if they're not getting back to me, I may want to start applying to some of these other companies. Fight for yourself. No one's going to fight for you as well as you're going to fight for yourself. Okay, talk a little bit about gaming and how it's a growing industry. I pulled some numbers online, and we kind of keep on top of this, but in 2020, revenues hit $152 billion, which is enormous. This is a huge industry. I mean, you're here listening to me talk because you know it's an amazing industry. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of studios involved that make great games, everything from mobile to console to PC to VR and AR. So there's a lot of different studios out there. 45% of that revenue came from the mobile world, which is really interesting. So the U.S. is number one with 36.9 billion. What else we got here? I'll just skip through some of these. So the game market's healthy. I'm fairly certain that the game development industry absolutely beats out the movie and film industry by far. So keep in mind, there's a lot of money there. I don't know if you know this or not, but FUNCOM is fully owned by Tencent. So we are a Tencent studio, very similar to Supercell and Miniclip and a lot of these other ones. But even Epic Games is owned partially by Tencent. So there's a lot of money involved in game development. There's a lot of studios popping up, and people are willing to fund studios because you can make a lot of money off of a game. So we are growing our studio. I think right now we have 85 positions available at FUNCOM. So we are staffing up heavily to make these Dune games, and even to make games like Conan Exiles. We're doing DLCs and stuff for that, but mainly to make our Dune projects. We're staffing up very heavily right now. Just put a fun Mario and Luigi image, but this shows you where I pulled the research for some of these stats. You can look this stuff up, but just reiterating that it's a growing industry, and there's a lot of money involved here. I always love Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm a Star Wars fan, so I like Star Trek, but I'm a Star Wars fan, so sorry if anybody out there is a Star Trek fan. I'm going to throw some resources at you. I don't know how much time I have left. Let me just double check. Got about 15 minutes left, so I'll probably wrap it up in about 5 minutes, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. So, all right, throwing you some resources. I said this before, but Game Dev Map, GameSmith, their development map. This is just an image from it, but This will allow you to hone in on the areas where there are hubs of video game development studios. All you have to do is click on a red location, find that developer. You can click links. A lot of times it will show you how many people are working at that studio, so you can tell if it's a small studio, a mid-size, a large studio. It'll tell you if it's a publisher, if it's a developer. If you don't know the difference, FUNCOM is a publisher and developer. So we not only make our own games, but we publish other people's games. So we did Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden. That was a published project for us. We are also publishing one called Metal Hellsinger. Wait till you see this game come out. It is a rhythm-based shooter. It is very similar to it's like if Doom and Guitar Hero were mixed together. So it's a demon and you have to shoot with the rhythm, and the music gets louder. It's a metal-based game, so metal music. It's coming out. So we're publishing that project with The Outsiders. We actually just bought their studio. They're in Sweden. But we are a publisher. So we find cool studios, smaller studios that are making games, and we help market them, and we do QA, and we get it certified on Xbox, PlayStation, Steam. So we do that kind of stuff. So that's the difference between publisher and developer. So anyway, back to the game dev map. You could find out who is a publisher, who's a developer, what's an indie studio. All that stuff's kind of in these maps. I don't know if you've ever heard of the game dev drink ups. I go to these occasionally whenever I have a babysitter for my kids. So there's one here in Raleigh. They're in all the different cities. This is where you can go out and just have a drink with some game developers. If you go to the one here in the Raleigh area, you'll meet people from Red Storm and FUNCOM and Epic, and you just have a beer, and they normally have a little bit of a structure to them, but it'll allow you to sit down and just talk to somebody one-on-one and just get to know somebody. And you're like, oh, I know Evan over at Red Storm. He's a great guy. I had a drink with him the other day. And I met Paxton at FUNCOM. He's the HR, director. It's really nice to meet him. So these type of things happen. Take part in them. Be proactive. That's it, actually. That's the end of my presentation. So honestly, this was probably one of my favorite games growing up. It probably is what got me into game development, was The Legend of Zelda. I'm in my 40s, and this game kind of changed things for me when I started playing on the Nintendo. I played on the Atari. I played Pong and all that stuff, but when I first played The Legend of Zelda, it kind of changed things for me. And I had an interesting background where I was doing marketing and advertising, and I said, I want to be in game development. I love the culture. I love the people. It's an amazing industry. I will say that. I changed my whole life to be part of the game development industry, and I would never go back. I used to wear a suit and tie. I did marketing and advertising for pharmaceutical companies, and I worked at the Bank of New York and Bristol Myers Squibb, and I did all these really crazy things over the years. And I get to go to work in shorts and a t-shirt and work with some of the most creative people that I've ever met in all my life, and some of the most friendly people, and the culture fit is amazing, and everybody's just out to help each other, and it's an amazing industry. So if you're not in it already, hopefully some of this will help you get into it. But I'm always available if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to hear me say anything else, just ask me. So I'll open it up to anybody here that wants to ask me a question, or if there's anything online, I will absolutely answer some of that stuff. So, okay, question.
So I have a 10-year background in QA software testing.
Yeah.
I've applied at Epic and Terry, North Carolina. I've applied at Bethesda, Maryland, where I currently live. How do you break into the industry as a QA person? I have, a lot of defense contracting background here as now for Amazon and all that sort of places. So I'm trying to see, am I overqualified for some of these positions?
Without looking at your background and experience. So QA typically can be an entry-level thing for people to get into the game development industry. That's one of the positions where we will hire people that are passionate about games. They may see you as overqualified, but presenting yourself as knowing games, I don't know if you're doing that on your resume. If you're saying, I have a passion for game development, because if I looked at your resume and I saw that you were doing a lot of stuff with, tech companies or corporations, I might not know that you are passionate about games, and you might not play a certain game. Like if you said, I've logged 1,000 hours into Conan Exiles, and you had this background, I'd say, all right, cool. Like he's played my game. Like he would be great on my QA team. It all depends on how you're presenting yourself to those hiring authorities. So, I mean, if you want, you could shoot me over your resume. I could help you out if you want. But like, honestly, presenting yourself as a person who's passionate about games, and I mean, do you play a certain type of game? Like, do you play a lot? Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, getting out of the defense contracting, like, how do you get into, you know, QA for, you know, video game company, like, you know, Call of Duty.
Right.
We play a lot of multiplayer games.
Mm-hmm.
Squad-based stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard to figure out how to, you know, for something that you love to do, right? Because I work so that we can survive, but it would be great if I could be
And be passionate about it, right? And like do something that you passionate. I get it. Yeah. So I know FUNCOM's very different with our QA. We hire full-time with full benefits. We treat our QA as development QA. They're part of our design team, our programming team. So we outsource a lot of like the smoke testing stuff to external people. So our QA is very specialized. But I know Epic Games, I don't want to talk for them, but I do know that they use a third party and contract out. So most of the people that are in QA, a bulk of them are contractors, and they have an hourly rate. So somebody at Epic may look at you and be like, all right, he's in QA, but he's got a full-time position making a lot of money right now, and he's not going to want to accept a $12.50 hour, you know, contracted position in North Carolina. So like, you're going to have to look at the studios that are looking for more like embedded or dev QA that are looking for somebody with more experience than like Epic. So like, yeah, that's what I would say. Like, present yourself as like, here's my background. I'm passionate about gaming. Here's some of the games I play, but apply yourself to like embedded or dev QA instead of like traditional, you know, standard QA. Yeah. Any other questions for me? I'll answer anything about game development, about branding yourself, about whatever you guys want. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think a mic's coming to you. Tom, right? It's Tom? Yeah. Mike's coming to you.
Yeah, you said you were contracted to make 3 Dune games, and the first one is a persistent online game. I mean, when I hear like contracts for making 3 games, I assume like, you know, Uncharted 1, 2, 3 or something like that. Did you make those types of games though? So did they expect you to do 3 persistent games? Did they expect you to do a trilogy, or did you just say, hey, first one's persistent, and we've got these other crazy ideas for later, which I know you can't talk about?
Yeah. So we do know, we haven't really made it public. It may be internally developed. It may be a published project. I will say that. So like, we have 5 years to do it. We want to see how we're going to do with this first Dune game. We're trying to do it in between the movies, you know, with Legendary Pictures. So we're going to be releasing this, see how it does, and then we'll grow it from there. But we are also looking at other studios that are making games, and if it works, that may be a Dune game, great. That may be something that we would consider looking at in the future. So yeah, it's an exciting IP, honestly. If you haven't read the books or know anything about Dune, it's pretty interesting. Like, these movies are going to blow you guys out of the water. So it's beautiful. I hope that it's going to be like the next Star Wars. Like what they did in the actors and the bar that they raised with this new movie with Legendary, it's pretty amazing. I hope I'm not hyping it up.
I think it's the same director as Blade Runner 2049, which I'm huge fan.
So
one more question. What's the weirdest skill you've seen listed on a resume? Because I have a friend who's done hiring. He said he had magic tricks listed there, and then they asked him to bring a deck of cards so they could break up some of the more boring candidates in between interviews.
Let me see. I mean, I've had people that are like expert marksmen and stuff that they've written that, where they've been like, I've hired ex-military people, like things that I've seen on there. I'm like, that's really cool. I mean, if we're doing a game that in North Carolina, we are responsible for everything in the new Dune game that has to do with combat, animation. So like, my team is a lot of combat people. So my lead designer came from America's Army, and he worked on Fallout 76 and then Mass Effect games. So like, a lot of my team members are all about weapons, and my hard surface artists are making weapons. So somebody applied, and they were an expert marksman that did, you know, I think they almost got into the Olympics for marksmanship. So when I saw that on a resume, I was like, that is really cool. Like, if you were an expert marksman, not only can you like design games and kind of hard surface them in a 3D world, but you can actually shoot and do that. I thought that was really cool. I also am an advocate of like shooting and guns and stuff, but like, yeah. So I saw that, I was like, that's pretty cool. So yeah. Nothing super weird. I mean, I see weird stuff all the time on resumes, but like, nothing's really standing out to me as like, that is super weird. So yeah. Anything else? Yeah. You want to pass the mic? There is a mic. Sorry. Don't want to intimidate you. I think it's also because streaming, so people could pick up the questions online and hear what we have to say. So they could hear the whole conversation.
Okay, so I have a son who's 13 years old.
Yeah.
And he's really interested in gaming. And I'm just trying to make sure, as a parent, I'm directing him the right way to do the career he wants to do.
Yeah.
What kind of majors and degrees should we be looking into as he prepares to go to college?
So I'm going to reiterate, find out what he's passionate about. Like if he's passionate, like if you notice that he loves the design of games, if he's like, wow, the mechanics of this game are amazing, and the fact that I can get this DPS and this support character to do this and this and this, or he's into puzzles, like he may be a good designer. Or if he's like, I want to figure out how this works and the programming side of this, he may want to go into a programming path. So like you have to figure out what he wants to do, or at least introduce him to different things. So a lot of game design degrees, like I know here in North Carolina, there's Wake Tech, and they have a game design and simulation program. The initial classes will try to figure out what people want to do. They'll introduce them to some animation and some 3D and some programming, and they'll try to like push people to what they want to do and what they're passionate about. Just find out what your son likes to do and foster that. Like if he's like, does he draw? Like or does he just like playing?
No, he's a coder.
That's amazing. I can't tell you. I think most of my positions are coder positions. To be honest with you, we need great coders in video game development. We need people that know C++, that know C#, that know Python, that can do back end, front end, you name it. We need programmers. I'm hiring an animation programmer right now and an AI programmer. I mean, we need good programmers out there. So get him early in on like downloading the Unreal Engine or the Unity engine, playing around with it, learning some C++. Like that is going to give him super valuable knowledge that he's going to be able to then translate into a college class and kind of push him to more of a software development programming degree. So you're a great mom for being here. So I give you props. That's awesome that you're here and you're advocating for your son. So thank you for doing that. We do everything that we can to try to foster growth and doing that. So be there for him. Try to push him into what he's passionate about and find resources for him. Like downloading those game engines, it's free. It's free to download some of the bigger engines and just play around with them. Have him play around with those engines.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Yes.
Thank you. That's easy.
I got about 4 minutes. So.
Sure, I'll make it quick then.
Yeah.
I've had the good fortune to get to the late stage interview process with about 5 or 6 different companies in the last year. Without a doubt, every single HR rep has told me I've been down to the last 2 or 3 people. They've been impressed with my skills. They really like what I've done, but I'm not quite the right fit for the position. They're going to keep me on file and call me. You guys just being polite, or are you actually going to keep me on file and call me?
No, we really keep people on file. I'll give you a real world example. I didn't hire somebody locally for a technical QA position, and he was amazing. It's just I had one other candidate that had more experience at Epic that worked out better. I ended up needing to hire somebody else. 6 months later, I called that guy up. He now is hired as a technical QA person because I had him waiting. And I apologize. I said, I'm sorry, I can only fill one position right now, but I kept him as somebody like in my back pocket. Like when I'm ready to hire somebody else, I'll hire this guy. And I'm sorry that that's happened to you. Like, it may be, you never know what people are exactly looking for. Like for us, it's like, okay, we are really looking for people that love survival games, that have played Minecraft and that know Ark and Rust and Valheim, like people because we make persistent online survival games at FUNCOM. So people that have those backgrounds are what we're looking for. So you may have applied to us and been like, I love video gaming. I play a lot of Rainbow Six Siege and it's what I do. And I'd be like, that's great, but you haven't logged the hours into survival games. It may not be right for what we're looking for. So you never know what a studio is exactly looking for. So don't take it personally. Just keep trying. Yes, we do keep people in our back pocket. And if you want to message me your information, I'd love to look it over and see if there's a position we have for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? I got about 2 minutes left. We can end it early if you guys want. We're good? All right, cool. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you.